environment, especially with a small day dominating the media. Now, a couple
weeks ago, we saw Kaichou News publish from a Mr. Hunt, that the royalty we're collecting is not 2% as per the PSA, but 0.5% based on his calculation.
Now, Mr. Hunt was, I think, formerly the head of JNCB. He is, or he prides himself as being a great technical person. He resides abroad. Kaichou News gave prominence to that story. So the headline screamed, Guyana is collecting 0.5% royalty on sales of petroleum products instead of 2%. It blames the government for not exercising due diligence. A couple days later, the same individual, again headlined in the Kaichou, that as a result of the government not collecting the royalty at 2%, we lost $208 million US over 3 years. I addressed that issue last week. I pointed out that the calculations were wrong. I outlined how the royalty is calculated. And then we've had this week, again, Christopher Ram, who had weighed in on the same royalty question, supporting Hunt. In Starbuck News, continue the same issue, that 73.8 million of royalty are unaccounted for. Then in the same article, he says, we're not sure about that because this could be, we don't have all of the sales figure for the current year, for 2023. We don't have the figures for Exxon use of fuel, which is the royalty is calculated on sales of petroleum products, net of that, what they use for own production. And then he said, oh, this could be because of the accounting basis on which it is used to calculate both. One is done on a cash basis and the other on an accrual basis. So what that effectively means is that timing. So assuming a shipment is made in December, we will not collect the royalty for December of 2023. We will not collect the royalty until 2024, but it will be for 2023, a shipment on 2023 basis. So there's a difference between cash and accrual. So he boldly says 73.8 million unaccounted for, and yet says, oh, we don't know about all of these things. So this is the sort of thing every week we have to contend with. The basis is quite clear. I saw some letters from several people who have dealt with this matter, showing the calculations. The royalty is collected. It's a 2% royalty. We collect every bit of it, and we've outlined the basis on which it's collected. So these guys, they just speculate. It's wild speculation. It's sometimes some of the most ridiculous analyses that pass off as technical work. They get the headlines, bold headlines. Oh, $208 million of royalty missing. The government 0.5% instead of 2%. 73.8 million still unaccounted for. It's all a lie. And this is what sustains some of these newspapers, like the Kaichor particularly. It sustains them by lying every week or by not exercising due diligence. They just lie blatantly. They just look for anybody who says something anti-government or to prove that we're not doing our job, and then they headline it. And then shamelessly, they will never correct it. You can give 100 explanations. When they're caught and exposed, they will never go back to correct it, to say, we were wrong. We were wrong. So technically incompetent, first of all, to understand a lot of these things, including the financial matters. And I say this in full consciousness, that they're incapable of understanding a lot of the financial issues, and when exposed, they will never correct it. As I said before, this is not the feature of newspapers. But we've had to deal with this almost every single week at these press conferences, not because we like to do so, because it's circular. Every week we have to say almost the same thing and address rumors instead of serious policy matters. How can we create more jobs for people? How can we create better paying jobs? How can we get more of our people trained? What are the government plans for all of these things? These are the important things. But we can't get around to that because we have to deal with these rumors. So that's just the last week. Then again, consistent with their line that any person, some of the vilest persons, including Patterson, who is charged for corruption, he gets two headlines in the newspapers this week. 20-year maintenance contract for gas to energy project will benefit PPP boys. So the next one says, when the documents are laid in Parliament, it would reveal the true beneficial owners of, not beneficial, beneficiaries of the maintenance contract for the gas to energy project. So let me say here, this is what he says. He reasoned someone has to operate and run it. It's not GPL who is the company. It's not the company that is building it. It cannot be that company operating and running it. How are we going to get that? So therefore, there will be a plants, there will be a company collecting the money from GPL that will be just like Wärtsilä, used to do plants and ON. It's a little incoherent. That company, who are the beneficial owners of that company, because I mean, if it is one of the PPP cronies and you get 1 cent per megawatt for 300 megawatts for 365 days for 20 years, if you do the math, you can see that is generational funding. So he calculated how much this company will benefit over 20 years. He concluded that there's a company, a PPP company, that will get this money. Big headline, 20 years maintenance contract. So what would the people of this country think about this? They would believe that there is this contract, it's for 20 years, and it's linked to a company associated with the PPP. The fact of the matter is there is no such company nor agreement. That is the fact. There's no such company nor agreement. We have not decided which company. We're building the plant. We still have to go out to tender for a company to operate the plant, manage the plant, and it will be an international company. Because this technology there, using gas, we don't have that capability in GPL at this stage to manage a new plant of that nature. But the facts are that we have not, there's no such contract, there's no such company. He's already concluded will benefit PPP boys, and he calculated how much money too. And it's all fictitious. Fictitious, but he gets 2 headlines in the Kaichor News for this fiction, a lie that he's telling. And so how do you deal with that sort of thing as a government? People can understand the difficulties we have, because already around the world, people reading this, thinking this is a newspaper publishing this, they would have done due diligence to check that it is, that somehow PPP people will benefit from the gas to energy project. I'm through a maintenance contract when there's no maintenance contract. This is the sort of environment we live in, and the lies that are told on a daily basis by the Starbuck News in bold headlines. So once you say anything remotely against the government, you get a headline in the Starbuck News. But it's a lie. So we have seen this sort of position utterly ridiculous. It's not just from the Starbuck News. Not the Starbuck News, the Kaichor News. Again, we see this sort of ridiculousness coming out of the opposition. So the first thing is, they issued a statement just now that Norton is in the Rupunoni, and that because we didn't want him to get a crowd in the villages, we set fire to a bridge in Karasavai, implying we set fire to a bridge in Karasavai. My staff just showed me the fire. It's a little thing on a bridge like that. You could take some sand and throw it on it like that. I wonder if his team didn't set fire to draw attention to nobody showing up at his meetings in the Rupunoni. So he's blaming the poor show that we set fire to a bridge in Karasabay. How stupid can the politics get? How more stupid, rather, that this guy is in there, he is at a dismal showing, nobody paying attention to him in Region 9. You know why? Because they neglected that community when they were in office. The ministers used to fly in. If you look at the cost of the flights going in there, they used to fly in there all the time, recreationally, and never visited the communities. One time I was in an opposition period. I was in one of the committees, I think communities, Shalton, and they heard I was there, and we took some kites for the kids. And then they chartered a plane and flew some kites in. And the people said the kite's so heavy it couldn't even fly. But they landed at the airport and distributed it and then flew off again. That's the kind of approach. That's why people don't want to see them in the hinterland. Not because the PVP is telling people not to show up at meetings. And in fact, if we tell people not to show up, I think I want to commend the activists for doing that. In fact, if they did that, they did a great job, the PVP activists, because people shouldn't show up because of the neglect of those communities, the Amerindian communities. I don't need to go through all of the things again. What happened in the Amerindian communities, the lack of development in those 5 years, and the neglect that those communities faced. But just issue a statement, that such criminal acts must only serve to create political tension and destabilize the region. That some little fire on the bridge there, that we set it. And he saw the fire there. His team is saying, look at the little fire there. Put it out. We set the fire. This is the sort of nonsense. The next thing is, Kaichor News asked me about the PSA, and that if I would basically have them, if they can come up with a framework for renegotiating the Stabroek PSA. So first of all, I pointed out that this PSA was signed by APNU. It was signed by APNU. Every day that the Kite News and many others try to criticize us for the features of the PSA, they need to know that it was signed by AFC and the PNC, that is APNU, basically, this agreement. So that's the first thing. Secondly, they hid that agreement for several years. Thirdly, they collected a signing bonus that they hid also, and they did not deposit in the consolidated fund, contrary to the Constitution of Guyana and the financial laws of our country. They never made public the environmental permits that they gave for LISA 1 and LISA 2. Never did that. They never answered questions at a press conference on the oil and gas sector. We had signed with Exxon, and that is how the exploration started, an exploration permit in 1999. APNU then signed the investment or production agreement in 2016. So they had an exploration agreement under us, which then got transformed into a production agreement at that time. So we made it clear in opposition that our unhappiness with that contract. I spoke directly to Granger in one of my meetings with him. I said, when the contract was finally revealed that it was a bad contract, we pointed out in opposition that if we sought to renegotiate that contract, we would stall all the investment programs, and therefore we assessed that we'd have to live with the contract, as we did with contracts that in the 90s that APNU signed that we're unhappy about, the Barama deal, the OMI arrangement, etc. But GT&T, when they sold 80% of the company for $17 million without any public tender, and I think it was, we had, GTC at that time had $5 million in the bank account, so effectively $12 million that they sold the company for at that time, without any public tender, by the way, without any public tender. And we lived with those deals. We're unhappy with them, but we live with them because you inherit these things when you come into government. We pointed out in opposition that here are the things. We put that in our manifesto, the things we will do, but we said we will not renegotiate the deal. We will try to ensure that we get greater benefits from the existing contract. How did we do that? The gas to energy project, the free gas there, we got that so that we can generate, and the investment there by Exxon and the others too, to ensure that we could cut our electricity prices by half to get $100 million US at a minimum saved by Guyanese who have to pay their electricity bill. And that's per year, that's the benefit. But we got the free gas there, we're getting the liquids from those gas that we can sell and pay back for the project in full. That's one of the benefits outside of renegotiation. Secondly, we said we have passed local content law so that apart from the revenue that comes to government, which is 2% royalty, etc., and over time, once the investment is amortized, you get 50% of the profit. So we said we will try to expand outside of revenue, more income for our people. And that's why we passed the local content law, so that forcing the oil and gas companies then in Guyana to procure only from Guyanese goods and services in a number of areas, which saw another maybe 600 million US dollars of business coming to over 1,500 Guyanese owned companies that hitherto had gone to maybe mostly foreign companies. That is our approach. It's a thinking approach we outline in our manifesto in opposition, how we will strengthen the NRF, the environmental permits, revision of the PSA for future agreements. We pointed out that we'll go to auction in the future to ensure greater transparency around the award of blocks. We've done all of those things. We have been clear about all of this. And we said before the elections, we're now renegotiating. That never comes across. We get now tainted for what every week, oh, Jagdeo doesn't want to renegotiate. But so Trotman has become the hero, the PNC, because Patterson conveniently and the PNC said, oh, we think we can renegotiate. But they're the ones who signed this bad contract. We have to be judged by our actions. Look at our actions. Look at the PSA now. That's the one. But we've sought to rectify what they did not do. We strengthen all of the systems. We answer now questions on the oil and gas sector routinely, which they hid from. That's the difference between the two. And we need to point this out. So when Norton says we can kickstart, he wants us to start with our PSA. I outlined several conditions. I saw he issued a press statement saying, oh, the only condition was net zero. I said, you tell me how we can renegotiate, because he himself is not calling for renegotiation. Norton, at least he's clever because he knows their own history and he knows what will happen with the entire momentum. So several things we talk about. We talk about three things mainly though: net zero, the loss of momentum, and litigation. I noticed he put out a statement saying, oh, net zero, you can use your own PSA because net zero is already there and you put out a PSA. He didn't address the other two issues, the loss of momentum and the ending up in litigation, which could kill future investments. And it's not net zero in the sense that we have to get to that point. It is ensuring that we get early investments in this sector in a very competitive environment where the world is now trying to seek greater investments in fossil fuel, including many developing countries, and they're not getting the investments. Suriname is trying to push the companies to start early in their country. They have not been successful. Many countries in Africa, you've had over 70 auctions that were launched by 70 odd countries launching auctions. Many of them never got a single bid in their auction. You've had the oil majors selling out their production arms, many of the oil companies. We've seen banks saying they're not going to finance any fossil fuel related investment because they pose a risk in the future to those bank assets, apart from the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance principles that many of them have adopted. Apart from that it poses a risk of stranded assets. So the environment globally to raise capital for fossil fuel related investments is an environment that is tenuous. It is not flourishing. So you have to ensure that if you're getting $60 billion of investments now, that you keep the momentum up. Other countries are trying to get that. And why do you need it now? If we don't invest now and the others succeed in moving ahead or net zero comes along, we'd be left with the resources stranded. The resources, not the assets stranded. we'd have all the oil in the sea, but we can't get them out because it simply would not, you wouldn't get no investment to do so. And trust me, we can't afford the investments to do that, the billions of dollars. I've pointed out that the total funds in our whole banking system is a fraction. It's less than one FPSO, the cost of one FPSO. Total funds in our entire banking system. So people need to understand magnitude. Glenn Lyle he thinks that you can get somebody to easily invest in this. You remember you were saying, why give it to the foreigners, give it to the locals? Well, they didn't put any bid in. We had the auctions out except in two. And then he's the same one who would cuss up the locals, say they don't have any capacity, that it's corruption. So this is something that the new PSA. So every week going over the same thing about, oh, Jagdeo doesn't want the PSA renegotiated. This week they had 9 articles on me. 9 articles. I wonder, somebody said I should collect royalty from the Kaichor News. So I wonder if it's 0.5 or 2% royalty I should collect. And if it should be on the full revenue, the tax evaded amount or the taxable amount, what should be the base there? So I should basically collect it because every week it's the same thing. Jagdeo is bad, Jagdeo must go, Jagdeo is not good for the sector. Terrible. I don't even waste my time on this. But one truth exists. In fact, several truths exist. That we're in an enviable position compared to the rest of the world. The reason why you see investors flock in this country, unlike other countries, is because of the momentum here. They're not coming only for oil and gas, agriculture, expansion, hotels, hospitality industry, services, a whole range of things. It's because of the momentum in this country. 2, we're generating tens of thousands of jobs more than in the past. In fact, we have vastly fulfilled, more than fulfilled, what we promised the people of this country when we were campaigning, that we'll get 50,000 new jobs. You've had labor shortages already in parts of this country. Difficult to get some kinds of skills in this country now. If you try building a house or doing something else of that nature, and see how hard it is to get people to work now in a whole range of skills. We've done that. The facts are that we have transformed, we have a process to transform education and healthcare. More of our people are studying. These are the things that are happening in this country. Contrary to the 5 years under APNU when we marked time and we retrograded as a society, we went backwards as a society. In all fronts. On all fronts. On governance front, they try to steal elections, etc. So that brings me to their next point and how ridiculous it sounds. And it gets headline again. GCOM commissioners say that the list is bloated. Vincent Alexander again. Now this is Warren's story, but he still makes the headline. Still makes the headline. Every single person knows in Guyana this is a typical APNU excuse for losing elections. Vincent Alexander says in a Guyana Standard article, he concluded it seems that our very electoral machinery is complicit in the facilitation of electoral malpractices. He's talking about GCOM. Vincent Alexander saying the electoral machinery is complicit in the facilitation of electoral malpractices. He is absolutely right, but for the wrong reason. he is right that it was complicit because the International Commission of Inquiry examined this issue, and they concluded that the chief elections officer, the deputy chief elections officer, and the RO for Region 4 were all trying to rig the elections in favor of APNU. We need to examine the role of some of the commissioners themselves and how they tried to prevent a recount. Mr. Alexander and the others, how they tried to prevent a recount, and how they tried to prevent any international scrutiny. Many of the commissioners on the other side tried to prevent a proper scrutiny of the results. In fact, they were in favor of announcing, they were supporting the chief elections officer in announcing the fake results. So for somebody to come and say that it seems as though the electoral machinery is complicit in the facilitation of electoral malpractices, that has been proven by the commission, the International Commission of Inquiry. And the matter is before the court now. But not because the list was bloated. And the question about a bloated list, what they call bloated, is not bloated. That when we had constitutional reform and the two parties agree, all the parties agreed to remove residency requirement as a condition of the Constitution to be on the list, any registration thereafter, as the Chief Justice ruled, can't now come and say if people are resident abroad, they have to be removed. Because you, the political parties in Parliament, you changed the Constitution in the early 2000s to remove that requirement. How is it that you want to do that now? Because it would be unconstitutional, the Chief Justice removed. Now he's talking about dead people. We're all in favor of removing dead people, whether they die abroad or in Guyana. They must be removed from the list. GCOM has to move to remove them from the list. But it can't be you remove people who are living because they're residing abroad now, because that would be unconstitutional, as the Chief Justice pointed out. Now, they can't vote abroad. We don't have overseas voting, so if their names are on the list and they reside abroad, they have to come back and go to the district in which they're registered to vote. And that's where the scrutiny is great. We have a folio with their picture. GCOM have a folio with people's pictures. Many countries don't have that, a picture ID and a folio, the staff, to match people when they come in to look at them and say, oh, this is the real person. We have a ton of checks and balances in the polling places. As a result of that, of the 660,000 people on the list in 2020, only 460,000 voted. But you notice in 2015, they didn't complain about the list was bloated. So conceivably, you could have 100% of the, 100 people living in the country, and you have 105% or 105 persons on the voters list, but 20 may be abroad. They migrated overseas. So under the Constitution, you can't remove their names, but they can't vote unless they come back home and vote. They have now lost their citizenship. So again, we hear these excuses, and it's given all the headlines again as though, oh, suddenly, yes, it has validity to it, that the list is bloated. And on Patterson beneficial ownership thing, talking about coming back to the gas to energy project. Do you recall the same thing being said about the Marriott? For 5 years, Glenn Lal in his newspaper carried that I own the Marriott, or friends of mine own the Marriott. He came to a press conference here, and then I was asked several questions thereafter by his reporters at many press conferences about the ownership. And I said, the government of Guyana has 100% of the shares in the Marriott. He disputed that on a program that I had with him. He said he had documents to show to the contrary, that there were others who owned the hotel. Until now, I challenged him and I said I will exit politics if he could show such documents. Until now, none of those documents surfaced because he knew who the beneficial owners were. So that lie lasted for several years. It gets repeated even up to now, in spite of all this evidence to the contrary. In spite of the fact that APNU was in office for 5 years and knew that it was 100% owned by the government. You think if I had owned the hotel, they wouldn't have exposed that? That would have been the first thing that APNU would have exposed. The same person said could supply power at 3 cents per kilowatt hour. There are hundreds of people lining up to do that. Up to now, no company that you were supposed to bring a company, and we said we will buy the power immediately at 3 cents per kilowatt hour. We don't need a gas to energy project if you can supply the power. It hasn't come, not for 3 cents, not for 5 cents, not for 8 cents, but it's all the time there. So this is the kind of speculation that we have had. I saw the Amanza Walton again exposing the APNU's position about a statement that Utah made about long-term integration of the Venezuelan migrants. Their Venezuelan migrant is a misnomer for most of those people. Venezuelan migrants. They're Guyanese. When we say Venezuelan migrants, it's just a few people of the lot that came back home. These are our people. These are our people. They have our blood. They're Guyanese. And so they left this country, fled APNU's hardships and oppression. They sought a better life there in Suriname, in North America. A lot of people from Suriname now, the pensioners, the people who never wanted anything, they're coming home now to register because the pension payment now is going to be next year $200 a month. So they're coming back because they're going to benefit now from their country. And we can't begrudge them. We can't begrudge them because they sought a better life elsewhere sometime in the past. And so even those who fled Guyana and their kids who were born, these are Guyanese children. Based on our constitution, they are citizens. They are eligible for citizenship here. They have Guyanese blood. I need to repeat that. And that's 90% of them. We have to extend some help to our own people when they come back here. Of course, we have to ensure that all those who stay here, they get a great education and they get help too, and housing and stuff. But these are our people. But this kind of racist view that somehow we must not do this because they're foreign or something like that, I think it's part of what we've spoken about, that APNU has too narrow a political view. It's too caught up in this kind of elitist approach to development and benefits from development that makes them unsuitable to govern a country like ours that is multi-ethnic and multi-religious. You have to have a broad-based approach. You have to approach this that these are all our people, regardless of their color, even their political affiliation. They're our people, and therefore they have to enjoy benefits, equally. And so we must condemn this. We must condemn this. This is the negative. There I see the same old negative politics. The other contender for Norton's position, Roysdale Ford, I saw him showed up, he in West Romvelt and East Romvelt. And they went there to tell the people that, oh, you're not getting all the contracts. Some other people from the other areas in Georgetown are getting some of the contracts. So they're not saying that we're doing every road in East Romvelt, South Romvelt, not South, East, West, Alexander Village, in those areas. And we've done Riverview, and we're working on Alboystown and La Penitence, we're working in Sophia, we're working in Port Morant, we're working in Buxton, we're working in Enmore, Fowles, every part of this country, in Linden, in Essequibo, every part of this country, in Canal, every part of this country that we're working in. So they went there to stir up people, and the people rightfully said to Annette Ferguson, you were Minister of Housing one time, we never got any help. The Laying Avenue people said that. Never got any help. She was Minister of Housing. They got some help from us. And then you were also minister in the Ministry of Public Works, and we never got our roads done. So why you're coming now, the shamelessness of it, they're walking on the same road we just did and cussing us out too, Again, shameless politics, cussing us out badly, They come here now because they want your support. Of course we want the support of people in these communities, but we want to work for their support. We want to work for it. We want the support. What are we, like dog bite us or something like that? We got to be stupid if we say we don't want people to support us. In every area, in South Georgia, we want people to support us too, but we're not going to say support us because, we look like you or something like that, because our makeup is diverse. We have Afro-Guyanese in our government, Indo-Guyanese, Amarin, every race. We're a team. We're a team. We're not going to spread racist messages on the ground and whisper campaign. We're working to get people's support right across this country. In our strongholds, we want to maintain our support. And in the other areas that didn't support us, we want to work for their support. And that's why we're emerging stronger and stronger every single day as a political party. So these are just some of the things that I wanted to talk a bit about today. But as I said before, it's really tough to tackle policy-related issues in an environment where you don't have an opposition that speaks to policy on a weekly basis. It's into gimmicks. And then you have a section of the media. It's a travesty to call them media. Nevertheless, we don't want to be caught up with this issue of saying that we're hostile to the media. They're easy to portray that, although they're political. Although they're very political. In fact, their objective is political. They go around flashing media credentials and saying that, you're hostile to media. Like what I said at Babujan. I made it clear that this is a free country politically. I saw them mischaracterizing that. Anyone can contest elections here. We've created the conditions for that, and we've fought for the freedom for people to contest elections. But if you distort our track record, and we may not be as vocal about defending our track record now for some of these individuals who are quietly distorting our track record or mischaracterizing us. Don't believe that it's weakness that we're doing this out of. That at the appropriate time we'll respond. That's not a threat to anyone. You're free to join the political ring. That's the kind of country we have. But you can't be thin-skinned when you get criticized too. Because if you dish it out, you have to be prepared to take it too. And when the exposures come. And so that's all we're saying. It's not a threat to anyone. It's just that once you put yourself in the public domain, remember we're all public figures now. And public figures, the standards have to be high. You have to be able to absorb more criticism. Like me, if it was a hole, I'd be a strainer now. Criticism used to bore a hole on me. I'll be a strainer now, especially from Kite News would be the main cause of it. Now, and they still exist. I still take questions from the reporters, etc. You have to take. So people need to be to understand that. So I saw them saying, "Oh, I'm threatening people." I'm not threatening them not to get into politics. I'm saying just be prepared to take as much as you dish out. So thank you.
Dr. Jagdeo, Guyanese critic for Daybreak News. The government's and GTU's negotiation has gone to halt again. Any perspective on that, and where can it go, and how we can get some resolve in the end?
So they said they're going to the court. That's what their last position from GTU is, and they're filing pleadings to the court. I want to wait to see what their pleadings would be to the court when they go back to the court. The court ordered mediation based on the rules of the court. We had some misgivings on the mediation because there is a prohibition when there's public policy involved that the court should really not order mediation. In fact, in the rules, it says that explicitly. And wages and salaries are a public policy matter. Two, we believe that there established grievance or dispute resolution mechanisms outlined in the labor law and in contracts. Therefore, the court should yield to those. Nevertheless, out of respect for the court, we participated in the mediation exercise in good faith, because we would like to see an end to this matter too. We want our teachers back in the classroom, want our children to be taught, but we want to ensure that we also preserve the finances of this country in a manner that don't harm us in the future. What the union wants cannot be accommodated by the fiscal framework, or it's not right. They want us to sign a multi-year agreement retroactively, a multi-year agreement retroactive to 2019. And then also address 2% from 2017 and another 2% in 2018. So that's to go back 7 years back to address wages and salaries issues that were not addressed under APNU when people already were paid, but not only teachers were paid. Public servants, everyone received those same percentages. So if you reopen that for teachers, you have to, out of fairness, you have to ensure that every other category would get the same retroactive increases. It wouldn't be fair otherwise. That we can't sustain that in the budget. And so that is what wanted negotiated. The fact is that we said we will discuss any proposal, but this is our view on it. In contrast, we were unprepared to do a multi-year agreement going forward. But we conceded that we will now offer the teachers the GTU, a multi-year agreement. So we said to them, we can go retroactive, but we're prepared to sign a 3 years agreement from beginning 2024. And please, you have 1 to 2 weeks to go back and come up with what you would like to see in the multi-year agreement and make the proposal. And we'd start the negotiations on that. They walked out. So the court ordered a mediation. Pursuant to that, we went back, we negotiated. So they said they're going back to the court. So let's see how it plays out in the court. But we're trying to be fair. We pointed out that even in the COVID years, can you imagine the 2 years when school was shut officially? But some teachers were working because not all the teachers stayed off. Some were working in the 2 years. They want a 25% increase for those 2 years. In the world, some people's salaries were cut by half in some countries. We maintain that. There was a call, people were saying, why don't we do that here? Because people are now working. Only the medical people were working in full force and the security forces. But like many public servants and teachers were not working. Why don't you cut their salary? And we said no. And in fact, in those years, there were still increases. So to go back and ask for a 25% increase in the years when we had, in the 2 years when we had COVID, it's not just, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And they don't recognize the effort we've been making in education now, to educate our teachers. We have accelerated training, access to scholarship, improvement in the classroom, all of this that will ensure a better environment for the teachers. So let's see how it goes in the courts. They said, I think today that they plan to file some pleading before the court. So we are waiting to see what they will put there.
Dr. Jagdeo, since the new PPP-led administration has come into government, there's only been one instance where the government and the opposition has worked together. That is the Venezuelan issue. One instance. Is the government being naive, taking into consideration the opposition modus operandi, the opposition association with the GTU? Is the government being naive to the fact that there might never be any resolve and this is a deliberate attempt to derail the government through suggestions that there may be negotiations in light of all the evidence that exists?
My own assessment of this is that from the reports I get is that there are elements within the teachers union delegation who are not interested, whose demeanor and tone at the meeting would demonstrate that they're not interested in an agreement. They want turmoil. I've already pointed out that Coretta McDonald, based on their own union rules, should not be a member of parliament, or she should resign as general secretary of the teachers union. The rules of the union prohibit a general secretary from being in the parliament. That's your own union rules. She has flagrantly violated that. anyone who has listened to Coretta MacDonald would recognize that she has more political interest. She said, I could form a political party and get several seats based on the support from the teachers. Two, you can deduct the money if you wish. I have a donor or donors who will pay the teachers and corporate sponsors who will pay the teachers. Three, the union dues, we can collect our own union dues. So all of these things lend me to believe that this is a very political issue, and that those teachers and members of the union in the leadership, and I think there are many in the leadership who want to work to resolve this, that they get browbeaten. They get threatened implicitly that they must not reach agreement, that we must keep this hostile. In the meantime, APNU is busy working through its proxies, the Lincoln Lewis and the others, to try to stir up a mass uprising of unions. He hasn't been successful because most people know that Lincoln Lewis doesn't have any credibility. You just have to look at his track record and know that he will sell out workers, as he's done so many times before. He's sold them out at OMI, everywhere else he's gone to. So I don't need to. I can go back to a long history. I know his entire history. So this is part of, I'm not naive. I'm not naive to think that APNU doesn't have a hand in this. Because if they had they came out and issued a statement, not and address the nation. And now we have to go back and fix from 2017. So they're so proud of how they treated the teachers. The teachers couldn't even get a meeting with them. They're so proud. And now the teachers are asking, oh, go back from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. They were in these 4 years in government. And we must now go back and address salary proposals from those years too, for them. But they're so proud to talk about their track record. Well, we know otherwise. So I have no doubt that they're deeply involved in it to create some instability in the country. They're not very successful because most people see through this. I've seen some of them getting very political, like some of their two teachers, particularly one in Berbice and another one, and people say, oh, they were associates of the PPP. I've seen their political statements. They're urging people not to support the PPP. This has nothing to do with industrial action. But these are the same people, one is in Skeldon and another one in Escobar, who stood by when APNU closed that factory in Skeldon. Think he would influence the people in Skeldon? And shut a couple thousand workers were laid off. Escobar Coast was, the drainage and irrigation work stopped. The Granger said rice is a private business. No development there in the Escobar Coast. So people would not bother with them too much. They're trying to make it a political issue. There are lots of teachers who may want more money, who are supporting the PPP. And I can empathize with them. But they understand the big picture too. What's going on in this country.
Dr. Jagdeo, recently the opposition-led mayor and city council tried to derail a development project that would see the transformation of Georgetown in general. What does the government have in place for investors? Obviously, the mayor and city councils play a role in the development in Georgetown. What does the government have in place or in play for investors and assurances that no matter what, once projects are going to the law, they will be afforded the opportunity not to be oppressed or derailed by the opposition or opposition-led associates?
Yeah. I think it was last week or the week before, I dealt with this issue, that we have to fight for development in this country. If you look at, under APNU, there were very few new developments in the 5 years. So the Sheriff Street Road was paved, but we left that contract in place. The East Coast Road was paved. We left that in place too. They completed the West Coast Road, the pavement of the West Coast Road, the Parika to the bridge. That was a PPP project. Almost every single thing that was done in that period was a project from the past on the roads. They didn't do much housing. We didn't have new hospitals. We didn't have much work on drainage and irrigation in the country. We lost jobs. We had higher taxation. You had the few projects that were done, the big centerpiece. Think of a project that they did. The big centerpiece was the Durban Park project. $1.6 billion. We don't know how it was spent, but the Auditor General said 600 million missing. That was their centerpiece project. This was the pride. The first 2 years, the pride of APNU. Look what they did here. They cleaned up this city. They built this thing here. They renamed the Otachong Convention Center. They renamed this. This was the kind of thing. Granger was going around naming tongues and stuff like that. The tongues always existed here. Arches and stuff like that. Lots of arches and stuff like that. Nothing, if you think about it, if we go back, sometimes we don't go back enough. This is what they were doing. Arches, planting a couple of trees here, renaming places, getting 10 buses and putting Granger thing, and big ceremony to launch it, his name on the buses or a boat in the Essequibo River, in the Pomeroon River. Nothing of major substance. They messed up everything else. We lost on the environmental side, we lost the successor agreement to the Norwegian one. They didn't focus on that. They messed up the oil and gas negotiations. If you think about it, that's all failure about everything. But you didn't see this kind of groundswell that the thousands who were losing jobs or anything else because nothing was happening and people didn't care. So we came back in office. Stabroek News and many others. Kaichur worse. Oh, we're moving too fast. As article, we're moving too fast. We shouldn't be moving so fast. But you have 12 hospitals being built and all of the others rehabilitating, we're moving too fast. Oh, we're putting up too many pumps now. We don't need a pump. You should give the workers the money, but we're preparing for flooding in the future. Okay, so we have some issues with pump. You were one of the men who building the pump. Big controversy about that too. But we'll get past because we're committed to transparency in all of these things. And we can prove that it's transparently done. Things are delayed, yes. But we're putting up pumps to plan for flooding in the future. We're expanding our road network to make sure that the traffic volume that will increase with prosperity, that people can go around the country easier. We've restarted our house lot program. We now have 30,000 homes built in the 3.5 years, not homes, house lots prepared. People are getting their house lots up to 2019, including if you had applied in the APNU years, it's happening. We reformed the oil and gas sector. We've had momentum there. New hotels, all of these are happening. So we see the same old group that was opposed when I was president to the stadium, the exact same people. Now they're coming up, they're opposed to the Marriott Hotel, the stadium, the Berbice Bridge, the convention center, almost everything. I can't even remember the things. They oppose everything. Everything. That these were corrupt projects. So the airport expansion that the PNC turned into a rehabilitation project. That was a brand new project that we appointed. All of these things they were opposed to. So they're back at it again. This is what PNC is good at, pulling things down. They don't initiate new things. And the mindset to they're destroying their own supporters by pushing this victim mentality. That is why we say to people who supported APNU, come to us. If you're part of our collective, we expect you to personally develop and also to be part of the development of the country. The youngsters, and you see thousands of people who are coming to us, including many Afro-Guyanese, because we want them to own a home, not rent, as Norton is saying. We have a different philosophy. We want their children to study, we want them to have a good job, everybody in the country. That's what we teach in the PPP. We want people to get wealthier. We want them to push. Not everybody at the same time could get it done. You can't help everyone. And sometimes some people want everything at the same time too. But we have a positive mindset. Look at some of the people. Oh, if it's not royalty, it's something else. We shouldn't build a gas to energy project. So they don't tell you how we're going to get cheap electricity. They kill the hydro. They didn't invest in fossil fuel plants. Not, in the 5 years, no investment practically to supply electricity. The units that we had there were put under the PP. They're getting older all the time. They want cheaper electricity. They want stable electricity, but don't make no investment. We come back, we put together a project. We said in the next year, you're going to cut the price by 50%. Cooking gas will be cheaper. Reliable electricity. We'll put in street lights everywhere. We put the money in the budget to light up our country, greater security. They opposed it. Kaichor News, the financials are not wrong. We pointed out that this is one of the most lucrative for our country projects ever in our history. It's a big investment, but it's lucrative. They ignore all of that. They go to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to try to get us to block the project, to talk about it. APNU is opposed to this. The crazy Patterson says, oh, a contract, this is for PPP boys, a maintenance contract will be signed. He said actually it's signed, but speculating. There's no such contract. The distortion every day. It's typical PNC. And so the city council will try to block everything too. They will try to block. They're negative, but not to block for development, because they want to get their hands on assets so they could sell it out. They were telling the people in Georgetown that the PP, if they win in the city council, they would sell out the assets. You find out who all the corrupt transactions in the city council were done by. They control the city council forever. You find out why they have no audited statements for a number of years. For 15, 20 years, they can't show the records of their spending, their financials, because of the same thing. This is typical PNC. So it's a struggle for everything, and they distort everything. First, it was the ownership of the land. They own the land. You will hear them come up with something else now to stop development, because they believe that if they keep the country impoverished, then they can argue that we're not doing a good job. So I don't see this as an isolated activity. The one that they're blocking, the city council trying to block the Qatari investment. That investment will be $300 million US. A massive facility there that will serve our country for the next 30 years. The people can't fetch it to Qatar when the hotel is built here. It will be run by or staffed by Guyanese. You go into the Marriott, and it's proud. You see our people there working. They have jobs too, and they work there. That will happen here too. We have to think bigger. They're incapable of doing this. So it is not isolated. I told you all of this to get back to one point, that this is not an isolated thing. It is part of their strategy. They will oppose everything. Norton is in the in Region 9 now saying we burn a bridge. A little fire like this, a tiny fire like this, he put on the bridge there. I suspect it's somebody from his team light the fire and then take a little video there. We set fire on the bridge.
Dr. Jagdeo, the facts of the matter as it relates to this country and its development is clear. It is so clear that within 3 years, the PPP administration is outdoing a former PPP administration, which you led for 12 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Literally outdoing in 3 years.
Yeah.
Given your past with the media, you have blocked media operatives from your press conferences for less than what Kaichur is doing presently. Given the fact that you do not really benefit, no matter what you say, it is twisted by Kaichur, given the fact that the citizenry are not interested in what the spat between yourself and Kaichur is. Why don't block Kaichur reporters? Are you getting soft? Is it time for retirement for you? What is going on?
There's one person that I had asked. But yeah, you got to also, yes, this week he decided. All right. So let me get short answers. So the thing is that the person that I blocked here, I blocked him for a specific reason, racism. And I can relate the incident. I don't want to go back into history, but it goes back to what he did in Antigua. When I was there as president and I visited the Guyanese community. And that's why. So people don't know much about it. It's pure racism. And so it was always about, oh, I didn't like the reporter, etc. I believe it was an expression of racism, what he did. And that's why I blocked him. Here, as I said before, people will question whether Kaichur News is a newspaper. I think it's not a newspaper as such. It's the political arm of a party that, it's like New Nation or Mirror. It's not, the stories are not fair, they're not balanced, there's no even a veiled attempt to upkeep media standards. It is a political paper. But even if Mirror were to come here, or New Nation, or Village Voice come here, I will not throw them out. So that's how it has become with Kaichur News. I now have to almost respond to them in that manner. They don't come here to get answers to questions. They come here to ask me a question and then go back and distort my response. And so, but I still have to offer them the courtesy of responding. But they're not here to find the truth or to inform the public on any issue. So that's why it's a very different situation. And yeah, and they want me to go too, so you may have a common ground on that. Maybe that's why they're coming to harass me so much. They've been pushing that I should retire from politics now. Yes, go ahead.
Dr. Jagdeo, Kurt Campbell, Newsroom. I want to go back on your statements regarding the migrants from Venezuela.
Yes.
You said these are our people and just a few are actually Venezuelan
Yes.
migrants. But I wanted to know if there's any specific survey or data gathering process that informs your statement.
This is, yes, the ministry has a lot of information on the people who are coming back. And we see it in the agencies too. When they go in, right? When they come in or the services are offered and you talk to them, most of them will take you back to the past. You know, they go back, their grandparent went off, their mother or the father, etc. So we can trace a lot of those. The majority are significant majority are Guyanese.
Dr. Jagdeo and As Williams, Sky News. Last week you mentioned that the billboards of ExxonMobil saying that Guyana is getting 52%, that those billboards are misleading. I want to know, have you made any request or order to have those billboards removed? Because if they're still on, then obviously it's giving misinformation to citizens.
So what I said is that it creates the impression, they apply, it creates the impression that we're getting 52% of all the profits now. And that's not so. In fact, it will always be more than 52% of the profits. It will be more than. Because if you get 50% of the profits and then 2% of the gross in royalty, then it will be more than 52% of the profits. But that, so what is not conveyed, that 75% of the revenue goes to now repay the cost of the investment. So it's accurate. We will, the PSA says 52% of, or 50% of profit, but it conveys a misleading impression. And it's not just that one billboard. It's several that almost like they're financing everything in this country. Oil and gas revenue now, if we spend all that we collected in 2023, will only finance, in fact, would finance less than 30% of our budget. So it conveys the impression that they're practically taking care of everything, schools and hospitals, everything that they're building, or they're financing everything. That is the misleading. So on what they said is not the inaccurate, but it creates a misleading impression. I've conveyed that already. But we can't, if people pay for their billboard space, Kaichur News could put up billboards too, right? I don't think we should take down people's billboard, although I do believe that they should correct that misleading impression. I don't agree with those billboards. They create the impression that they're practically financing everything in our country, when they are not.
Understood. Sir, since we're on billboards, there is a billboard around the vicinity of the Russian embassy that says something along the lines of the gas to energy project is expected to power the entire country and also cut the electricity bill, the operative word being expected. And if something's expected to do something, then it's not a guarantee that it's actually going to get there. Do you think?
I don't know the exact writing on it, so I don't want to comment, but it is, yeah, this is it. It's not going to power the whole country because the interconnected grid. So now we're going to build a transmission main. We got to build a transmission main from Garden of Eden all the way to, in fact, maybe from Eccles would have to be upgraded from the control center all the way to Linden too. Because we're making some investments in Linden now. We're putting in that the government is going to finance 12 or so megawatts of solar panel. But we're paying Bosai now a substantial sum of money every year to supply power to the community at very exorbitant rates. So because we have to buy the power from them. So we now need to take that power also to Linden. So we'd have power from Linden all the way to Crabwood Creek and then across the river. So we are working on an alternate arrangement for Essequibo because we don't have a cable to take the power across. So maybe that's what they meant by expected the country. But I don't know the exact thing. But it will come online. it will bring next year, it will bring 300 megawatts of power. 300 megawatts of power, GPL now supplies about 160, 170 megawatts of power at peak demand in the interconnected grid. So that will tell you that it's nearly double of what we have now that GPL supply would be available to us to supply the country. So we expect that that will meet all the demand. It is guaranteed that the price will come down by 50%. That's guaranteed. So we know it will come on stream next year. We know that the price will come down by 50%. We know they'd have nearly twice as much power now than GPL currently supplies. We then use all of those equipment that they have now supplying power to will go into reserve. So in case anything happens, we can bring those online. So that is, I don't know who wrote it, but I'm sure about these things. Okay?
Okay, another thing that you would have mentioned last week is that currently we're getting US 1.5 billion, and by 2027, we should be getting around US 9 billion. So we're getting into a little bit of maths here. So can you tell me how we got to that figure, firstly? And secondly, can you say, basically on average, the amount of oil that ExxonMobil will have to pump to get us to that $9 billion?
I thought I explained that a few weeks. If we're dealing with mathematics now, I explained that there is a financial model. So when you create a financial model, it has projection of, you can put in any figure. You can put in the figure for production. You know where we will be by 2026, 2027. It's around the 1.2 billion barrels. You know where you can put in the price assumption. So if the price is $100 a barrel, you'll get more. If it's $50, so you can play around with these numbers. You can change your production figure, you can change your price figure. You then have, which is easy to do, and that's why all of these guys, this straight line kind of approach, where some of these so-called analysts would do those two things, make conjecture. But where it gets more difficult is when you look at the payback rate on the projects. So you recall that the projects, all the time we're paying back the capital costs using 75% of revenue on the projects. When they did the initial calculation, it will take a number of years to pay back if the oil prices are $50 a barrel. If it goes up to say 100, and I'm simplifying, if it goes up to $100 a barrel, the pace of repaying is accelerated. So it cuts if you had 10 years to repay the capital cost of the project, comes down to 5 years. To the extent that you repay faster, more revenue becomes available for this distribution. And so that is, the model has several variables, and that's what they plug in, several of these variables. There are others too, right? There are others. So this is how you come up with those figures. And that's on the basis of having the production. So that emerged from the model itself, the financial model. So it's not an easy matter. Yeah.
Noted. The speed in which the oil sector is developing, we find that a lot of our skilled and professional persons, they're basically being sucked up into that industry, like carpenters, masons, etc. And also the pricing, it's obviously different. So I know you would have mentioned a little bit about it before, but just for some clarity, let's say, for example, an ordinary person wants to build a home, and a carpenter in the oil sector, they're getting, let's say 15,000, random number, a day. And an ordinary person, they obviously won't be able to afford that. Can you say what are some plans that the government is putting in place to basically have citizens to be able to afford the basic necessities?
Yeah, sure. So let's take your example. And you're absolutely right. We get this complaint from the private sector and from a lot of state agencies too, that our people, we're losing people sometimes to the oil and gas sector. We have, the private sector is complaining they're losing people at the bottom to the government because we're paying more at the bottom for, like, say, cleaners and stuff like that. That level, the government is paying even more than the private sector. So they're losing some people to the government. And then the skilled people going off to the oil and gas sector. So we don't have serfdom in this country. We share the philosophy, we believe in this philosophy, that you can't bind people to a job because you want cheap labor. They need that we have to equip as many of our people to get better paying jobs so they can improve themselves and the lives of their families. So if someone has a better job offer, we're not North Korea to say, you have to stay here. They get a better offer, they make their own decisions, they move. In as much as we're unhappy about it. Because that person, a Guyanese person, is improving his or her own life. And that should be the objective of the individual and the government too. So even with a lot of the contracts that people were signing in the past, when they studied with government funded those contracts, like you pay for a scholarship, you had to sign a bond. Now in most of the sectors, like on the gold scholarship, we don't ask people to sign any bond anymore. That means they don't have to work for government, they can work anywhere. They don't have to repay if they decide to move. So we see that is why we are accelerating training opportunities for people. We have several programs. The Ministry of Labor, Minister Hamilton, through the BIT programs and several other programs, are training more and more people at the lower end, the skill type, to give them better, like the carpenters, masons, etc. More people are trained there. Two, in the Ministry of Human Services, they're training more women there through the WIN program. A lot of training is taking place there, so more people can get jobs. Like people now need someone to care for the kids and all of that. They can find those jobs. They get their professional training. Then the Gold Scholarship. So that's what we are doing. We're hoping that more people would be trained, so you increase the supply of trained people in the market. We then hire these part-time job people, and we're pushing them to study so that we can bring more people, especially women, into the labor force. So we have more supply of labor. So that is how we are approaching this. Secondly, on housing itself, like you gave the example of housing. So a carpenter now gets a higher salary. So we recognize that the price of labor has gone up significantly. Sand, because of the demand, and stone went up. So if you're building the same house, because of great demand now. So we gave out, since we got back into office, about 9 quarry licenses. You have about 7 now starting to operate. So instead of having 2 operating quarries, we're going to have about 8 or 9 quarries. So we're increasing supply. We have already seen the stone prices fall back to about $10,000. It had gone up as much as $15,000, big shortages, etc. But came down back. You heard what I said about the sand pits, that we're looking to see how we can increase the supply of sand, including possibly having state facilities that would increase. so to bring down the price. We're trying to do that in Berbice too, where the price of sand is like really twice as much as it is in Georgetown in some parts of the country because of supply shortages. So we're working on that too. Thirdly, we decided that if you're building a low-income house, we'll give you, because it's mainly at the bottom where people at the bottom will be affected. So we now we will give you the cement and the steel to help to offset some of your cost increases in the other areas. We've then said we are prepared to build for you. If you have a plot of land, there's a program now we launch in the ministry. We're prepared to build for you, and then we take you to the bank. So if you have a plot of land anywhere in the country. The third facility is where we build the core homes, then young professional homes. So we've entered the building program to assist people in these areas. We've removed the taxes on a lot of the building material, the VAT on building material, to keep the prices down. So these are just, we have worked with the banks now to ensure that mortgage rates come down, because by extending the tax-free concession that they had, that where they pay no corporate tax on income arising from loans to the housing sector up to a certain level. So you can get a mortgage now at 3-point-something%, which is even lower than in the United States of America. Coming from a period when we just started, when we just got into government, where mortgage rates were 37 to 40%. That meant on your mortgage, if you borrowed $5 million, in 2.5 years, it becomes $10 million at that rate, and that's the past. Coming down to 3.5%, because I've seen the history. I have a longer view on these issues. So these are all things that we have done to help to ensure that we mitigate costs. Now, we allow some of the big contractors to bring in their labor, because if we don't allow them, say the Chinese who are building the bridge across the river, if we don't allow them to bring in their labor, then first of all, they would recruit in the local market. We may not have enough people, enough skilled people. The project gets delayed too, and it costs us more money. So that is to help to offset some of the labor shortages we have in some skill types. Truck drivers, all of these things we have big scarcity for. So we now need to, we're doing more training in these areas. A lot of training is being done for these facilities. So it's a combination of things. You're gonna lose people, but they're going for betterment, and you can't stop that. Why would you stop someone leaving his job because he has a better offer? And people, when they're training, that's what we expect. That's why we're funding the scholarships, that they improve themselves. And if the state sector can't yield you the salary that you want, and you get an offer in the private sector, that's fine. We're not parting on bad terms. We're fulfilling our responsibility to our people, the citizens of the country, by equipping them to get better jobs. So that's how.
Sir, going back to when you took office in 2020, at your first press conference, you would have promised to release the names of the beneficiaries for the Kaishore and Kanji oil blocks. Can you provide us an update of when this will be done?
I think that's already known. These beneficiaries are known. I'm sure it's known in the area already. That's been done hundreds of times already. So please go and do your research. You know who they are, the people are. So why you're asking me? You know who they are. In fact, you wrote articles criticizing people, saying that they didn't have the experience. Not you, but Kaishore News. But that's what I'm talking about, because you represent Kaishore News here. You wrote articles complaining the people didn't have experience, and you don't know who the beneficiaries are now?
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, I just have
okay.
two follow-up questions based on what you said. I heard you mention during the opening the press conference. You asked some more time just now.
All right, it's okay. All right, give him. Go.
Yeah. You mentioned that these guys are requesting, they're making wild claims pertaining to the royalty, and then they state in the articles that they don't have the production and the sales data. To have them make fair comments, won't the government push to have these things public so that they won't have excuse?
Shouldn't they say that? I don't have data, therefore I'm not going to put out a figure. You put out a figure because it's wild people. Why don't you? Any self-respecting newspaper would say, how come you calculated this? And then say, but this is flawed. I would not take a piece of junk, and if I'm self-respecting, and come to the press conference and use it as gospel. People would laugh at me. But you do that. Why don't you ask them, first of all, before you publish this, that they have to reach certain standards and say, if you're claiming you don't have the data or you don't know the accounting methodology, like Christopher Ram saying, I don't know if it's on accrual or a cash basis. It could be, right? The difference. Why don't you find out first of all? Why don't you find out before you publish an article with a bold headline, the money missing, unaccounted for? It's just to get in the newspapers. So that is it. For example, I heard you all ask for the information now on the schools. The headline says, government spent $75 million for the children on the nurses training in Essequibo. You could build a hotel with $75 million. The ministry put out saying it's not $75 million. In fact, we are renting the hotel. Two persons are staying in this room. They give them the breakdown and the number of rooms that the people are staying in. They put out this total figure. And now their Kaichor News is asking, can you send us some details about this? You already did the headline. You put out 75 million. Where did it, if you are asking for details, where did your details come to calculate 75 million? Out of Glenlal's brain? I was just saying somewhere else, yes. Right, I didn't know. I didn't say it, brain, out of his brain, yeah. Which is almost synonymous with the other. All right.
And next follow, you said something about exorbitant rates paid to BOSAI. Can we have those rates available? Like what the government is paying to have BOSAI give electricity to Linden?
It's. I asked for it to be calculated recently, and they said to me it's about 30 cents per kilowatt hour. It's about 30 cents per kilowatt hour. I asked them to calculate it because we now have to build a transmission main to take that over. It's about 30 cents per kilowatt hour.
And finally, when I wrap up, can we have an average fixed interest rate on the over 2 billion loans that is for 2024 budget? Like an average, you said the interest rates are fixed or something. Like most of them are fixed, but can we have like an average made public on the interest rate we are paying on these loans?
Listen, the documents, the loan agreements will be tabled in Parliament. They have to be tabled. So it's hard to do an average. You would have to look at every specific loan has an interest rate. So I can't say an average of. It has to be a weighted average, maybe the weighted average borrowing cost, which would be different. I don't want to give a figure, but you'll probably have to look at sum plus interest rate and then look at a weighted average. So as I said before, let me give you an example, because I just want to share things with you. You distort it in any case. So the bridge is like at a fixed interest of about just over 3% all in. Right? And then the Islamic Development Bank, which is a multilateral agency for the Linden-Soesdijk Highway, is 5.8%. Because by that time, interest rates move up, and this is a multilateral agency. It's not a private lender. It's a multilateral agency. So that's the kind of movement difference. So we find now that the multilateral agencies, which historically we had gone to, because there was no access to private capital, that their interest rates are higher now, and therefore it's forcing a rethink about approach to these multilaterals. So I just gave you range there, so you can have an understanding.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, thank you.